Okay, good. Then I will once again welcome you. More and more welcome. We are so glad you're here. We are so glad to have this evening here at the Earlham School of Religion. So happy to welcome all of you. And I see a lot of alumni here and a lot of emeritus faculty members and current faculty members and many people that are friends of ESR. So just the way this will go, I'm going to say a few words about Jim Perkins. This is the Perkins Family Lecture Series. And then Jim will introduce Noah. Noah will speak out of the silence. And when he's finished, we will return to worship. And after that, Noah will close with an invitation to us. So let me say that I have known Jim Perkins a long, long time. Right, Jim? We've traveled together, we've worshiped together, we've gotten into some trouble together. If you can believe that, some of you who know Jim would believe that. He's a bit of a rabble-rouser and a Quaker thought provocateur in the best sense of that word. I always love talking with Jim. He's also a rancher, a business person, a dedicated family man, a landowner, a teetotaler, and best of all, Jim is totally dedicating his life, has always dedicated it to the care and feeding of the Religious Society of Friends. Our Friends Society's vitality comes into every conversation that we have had in the past 20 years. I want to thank Jim for recognizing the place of the Earlham School of Religion in serving Quaker theological thinking and service. We are a seminary that can change the world, and that is what Jim is all about. So I thank him for supporting this community in multiple ways, including this, the creation of the Perkins Family Lecture Series. First, I want to thank Della Stanley Green and her co-director, Andy Stanton Henry, hyphen team, they call themselves, and even co-directors is hyphenated. So they are directors of the Quaker Leadership Center, and they've organized this event for us tonight. I want to thank Brown Mujete for his touch in all things ESR. I think he's online. And I want to thank Noah Bishop Merrill for sharing his wisdom and inspiration with us tonight. I'm going to say a few more things, but meantime, I'd like to invite Della up to read Noah's traveling ministry minute. Even shorter.
Noah Bishop Merrill, dear friends, Noah Bishop Merrill is a member of Putney Friends Meeting whose spiritual wisdom is cherished, and we recognize the gifts of ministry given through him. We are grounding his service through nurture and oversight. Since his first support committee in 2007, Putney Friends have been walking with Noah in this journey. Noah's work is the work of the meeting. On December 6, 2020, Noah's service in ministry through speech, writing, and presence was recorded by Northwest Quarterly Meeting of New England Yearly Meeting. Noah's faith has served as an instrument of love in times of trouble. He seeks to live in and be open to the life and power of God. We witness this. Under the guidance of the Spirit and with the prayers of friends, may his service among you be faithful. With Noah, we send our loving greetings, signed on behalf of Putney Friends Meeting this 15th day of 3rd month, 2026, and signed by the co-clerks of Putney Monthly Meeting, New England Yearly Meeting of the Religious Society of Friends.
Thank you, Della. I want to thank Jim for making this trip to Richmond from his home in Wichita. And I really, really want to thank Liz Hendricks, his daughter, Liz, who drove Jim here, which according to Google takes 11 hours and 9 minutes, and that's without stops. I just want to acknowledge the patience it takes to listen to the many stories Jim has to tell. Liz is the most dedicated and loving daughter. She knows this will earn her a place in heaven someday. I hope you'll listen to him there.
Question.
As Jim, we're going to take the microphone to Jim to introduce Noah. And as we do that, I just want to share one other thing with you, which is a gift Jim gave me when we dedicated this building to the Perkins Wildman family, and I am honored to wear it. From Jim. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your kind words. And now it's my turn. No, get on your knees and start to pray. I met Noah 20 years ago, so he was just barely out of diapers, but he was given the opportunity to be one of the major speakers at the World Conference of Friends in 2006 in Kenya. And I'd never met the man, knew nothing about him, but when he stood up and he began to speak, somehow he had the capacity to bring the message of early friends and the value, power that they had into modern day society. And I was amazed, and I thought he was speaking without notes, but one of my friends on the fencing bench said he had notes. A day or so later, I was on the other side of the campus, and there was a big chapel there, probably seated 1,500 people. Of course, our group wasn't that big, but anyhow, somehow or another, I just was led to go in and sit down. And there were a couple of people in the front of the building, and they left in a little bit, and I was just sitting there. And suddenly in comes Noah. He goes a few seats ahead of me and sits down. And I immediately knew why I was there. I had been led there to pray for him, which I did. And after I had finished, it was all silent. He turned around and smiled at me, and I knew I had finished. And so I went up and shook his hand, and it's been a history of friendship ever since. And he's been on my continuous Sunday morning go-to-meeting prayer list since ever since. Noah, you're a gift to all of us, and we bless you and give you the light and the power of the Holy Spirit to speak as your dad.
So let us enter into the spirit of worship, and Noah will speak out of the silence, and he will bring us back into the silence when he's finished speaking. Thank you.
Yes.
Can friends online hear me?
Yes.
Can friends in the room hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can friends in the room hear me better?
Even better.
Good evening, friends. Together. Thank you, Jim, Gretchen, Elizabeth, and Della, and Brown, and Michael. Burkle is here upholding our time together and my anxious speaking and prayer. Thank you to all of you who are here. You've taken your time this evening, or whatever time it is where you are, knowing that there are friends joining from a whole wide variety of locations in North America and beyond. Para empezar, necesito pedir perdón porque no he tenido la oportunidad de traducir el mensaje que voy a ofrecer, y entiendo que tenemos juntos con nosotros unos hermanos y hermanas que de habla hispana. Pero vamos a traducir el mensaje y distribuir las palabras de la traducción si quieren ustedes. It's just beginning by saying that I wanted to ask for forgiveness for the Spanish-speaking friends in the room who I did not have the opportunity to translate the message into Spanish before this time, but we will do that for those who are interested. As I speak this evening, I am humbled and grateful, understanding the friends both here in Richmond and from meetings across the United States and beyond, including my father and stepmother, and friends from my home meeting in the foothills of the Green Mountains in southeastern Vermont, have gathered to listen to this message and to reflect together on how the Spirit might be speaking to each of us in our own context through this shared time. I want to speak for a moment about the particular gift of being invited to offer this lecture, and to the season of prayer, reflection, and searching that an opportunity like this provokes. If you're like me, the busyness and many demands on our attention can distract from setting aside time to reflect deeply on the wisdom which might be wrung from the warp and weft of our lives. The invitation to be with you tonight offered such an opportunity, perhaps because I was vulnerable enough to receive it. It arrived during a season of grief, following the sudden passing of my mother and the murder of my brother within the course of 9 months. Yet within this season of grief was also an interweaving of unimagined joy, as my beloved friend Honor and I were found clear to be married under the care of our home meeting, receiving a blessing beyond either of our expectations through God's grace. Many of us know that these kinds of experiences, both great losses and great joys, can and do change us, causing us to re-examine the uses of our time and energy, even our vocations, in this brief and blessed life that we have been given. receiving this invitation during a time of doubt and darkness for us both, commingled with the candles of joy which for incandescent moments chased back the shadows, rekindled in me a spark of reassurance, a fragile trust that I might have something to offer that could be helpful to you who might share in this time, something that might be of use to us in our shared pilgrimage of faith as friends. And that initial illumination, as I experienced it and followed it, helped to bring me home once again to the calling to service that has come to be the through line of my own wayward and wandering life. I mention this because I think it's easy to forget the gift it can be to invite one another into deeper reflection and sharing of what glimpses of insight and humble wisdom each of us has encountered in our lives. I'm grateful for the encouragement and the occasion for recommitment to service that the friends who offered this invitation have given me. And I hope that this might also serve as an invitation to you to be watchful in your own lives and meetings for opportunities to remind others of the gifts you see in them and of the responsibility those gifts bring, that they be exercised in building one another up. His invitation, coming as it did, also reminded me once again of two of the most difficult and precious lessons I believe we can learn as human beings. There is no amount of grief that can make you unfit to be an instrument of God's love. And there is no joy, if it is true joy indeed, that cannot endure the presence of suffering and evil. In my experience, abiding in these truths, even as in the eye of a hurricane, brings a gratitude beyond measure. So I don't know about you, but for me, it is a fearful thing and a challenging one to be asked to offer a lecture on the broadly construed theme of the future of friends. I have recently done a little looking into the messages friends much more seasoned than I have offered on this theme, some of whom I know are in this room or listening online. Many of you listening may know better than I do that it's quite likely that if I were to begin now in reciting only the titles of lectures and addresses with a similar focus given in the last 100 years, perhaps not counting those few I have given myself, I would likely not be finished listing them until our time together tonight had long passed. The same can be said for messages seeking to energize friends to a renewal, to reclaim the fire of the early friends, of primitive Christianity revived, to return to our roots, and from these embers to resuscitate a Quaker movement that will meet this moment and respond to the many needs that assail us daily in the wider world, both in this country and beyond. This conversation about the future has also included countless propositions for the reinvention of Quakerism to respond to today's audiences, to adapt to a changed and changing world, to seek ways to revise Quakerism for the young people, or seekers, of our day, by removing supposedly outdated understandings or uncomfortable aspects of religiosity, to open wide the doors of participation to an ever-widening set of beliefs and worldviews, or, some argue, to focus the message of Quakerism on a particular set of strongly held politically progressive views. Other voices, almost in mirror image, call for jettisoning friends' sometimes awkward or misunderstood distinctives to allow for fuller participation in the wider movements of American evangelicalism. In this context, with such crosscurrents, such polarization, and such disparate voices saying something new, much less something new and useful, is a challenging task indeed. It is clear that there are many, both within and beyond our meetings, yearning for a deeper spiritual grounding and hungry for something that can sustain them in these harrowing times. I'm aware that many meetings across North America are seeing new waves of new people coming through their doors seeking connection. Even the renewed participation of many friends in their communities and local ecumenical networks and the increased visibility of friends in the public square creates opportunities as well as crying needs to articulate and model the life of faith in which newcomers might choose to participate, or which the wider world might be able to understand more fully, or even affirm. As I've held this opportunity in prayer, asking whether there might be anything of use that I could offer as part of this conversation then, what has arisen in my heart is nothing new. Instead, I have felt led to offer you a handful of tattered field notes from a journey of seeking to be faithful in company, a partial and patchy account of a pilgrimage in progress. I hope with humility to invite us into a way of seeing that might help us respond to the very real yearning that so many are experiencing. They can help us remember in some way the treasure that is already present and that has accompanied us since our beginnings. I want to invite us, friends, to a re-olding of Quakerism. By re-olding, I mean remembering that the story didn't begin with us. Re-olding means understanding ourselves as part of a story we did not create, a story still unfinished, a slow and humble story still in process about a pilgrimage of faithful people journeying together through time, who have sought in their own seasons and circumstances and sufferings to respond to and make visible the inbreaking of love, even now coming into the world. Re-olding our faith means living now, not in the past or the future. It means deepening our roots in and nourishing and drawing nourishment from friends' living tradition. In this moment, in this world, as these people, where we are. Re-olding stakes our faith on a trust that with help we can grow into fuller life and fuller understanding. That we are participants in a process of continuing revelation, yes, but that any claim to continuing revelation both presumes and requires prior revelation. Re-olding is understanding ourselves in the light of what has come before, allowing our way of living and our worldview to be shaped by the living stream of which we are a part, and then, through re-olded eyes, facing the tribulations and trials of the times we have been given. And so tonight, I am offering nothing new. Because I believe with all my heart that it is ultimately not a grand vision that will create the future of Quakerism. In reality, as it always has been, what we call the future of Quakerism will come into being through the lives and testimony of each of us who have set out in some way on this journey of becoming friends. The future of Quakerism will be settled and determined by the ways we allow ourselves to be met, guided, patterned, sustained, and sent by the same Spirit, full of grace and power, that has accompanied us always. Due to the sometimes meandering nature of my field notes, I think it might be useful now to offer you a summary of what I most hope to express this evening. It comes from one of the first people to be called friends, or perhaps more likely from a community of them, writing anonymously in what we now call the 12th chapter of the New Testament letter to the Hebrews. In the first years of the movement of the Holy Spirit that would give birth to the Society of Friends as one child among a diverse and ever-growing family in Christian tradition. Here's a paraphrased translation of this passage, seeking to amplify and make accessible these ancient words for our modern ears. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, that so easily distracts, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, the founder and perfecter, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and now abides at the inflection point, where everything comes together, the place of homecoming, in the power and the presence of God. So there, that's it. I hope you will feel free to log out of the meeting, friends. Turn off your cameras, collect your things, and move on to whatever else you might want to do with the rest of your evenings. Or, if you're still with me, let's begin. I want to speak with you about the second miracle. Jesus wept. Having learned that his dear friend Lazarus has fallen ill and died, he has traveled with his disciples to the cave where Lazarus' body has been laid. By this time, the poor man has been dead for 4 days. And there, standing at the tomb, Jesus weeps. I believe there's something here, even at the beginning of this story. Something about the tenderness of Jesus' heart, about the intimacy of this friendship, about the compassion God feels for each of us, seeing our suffering and mourning with us, accompanying us in the depth of our pain and struggles with the profound loss that is inextricable from our lives as human beings in this world, so full of pain and injustice. It says something about the nature of grief and grace that the story we are about to explore here begins here. Everything that follows in this story, and perhaps we may come to see in ours, flows from a recognition that whatever our condition, it is there that we can be met. But the story doesn't end there. And neither does ours, since we're a part of this story too. Jesus asks what is now a gathering crowd, including Lazarus' sisters, his beloved friends, Mary and Martha, to roll away the stone that has been placed as a seal on the cave that has become Lazarus' tomb. And then, in a loud voice, Jesus calls to the dead man, "Lazarus, come out." And indeed, according to the Gospel of John, This friend who has lain dead for days staggers slowly out of the cave, stumbling in a new flood of vitality, yet still bound tightly in grave wrappings, his face covered by a shroud. We can imagine, through the eyes of those who have passed down this story to us, what a sight he would have been. This man who had descended into death was now returned to life through the compassion and the call of his friend. And then something else happens. At first, it might be easy to overlook. It's certainly not as striking or dramatic as the first miracle, Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And yet, I have come to believe that what happens next is just as significant and can be just as instructive if we read it as friends and meetings seeking to be faithful today. What happens next is this. Jesus turns to the people gathered, to the community surrounding Lazarus and Mary and Martha, and commands them, unbind Lazarus, let him go. And the community responds. This, and what follows from it, is to me the second miracle. The first miracle is clear. The power of the Spirit restores life to Lazarus' body. And yet, removing the tightly bound grave wrappings and the cloth covering his face, helping to free Lazarus, so that the gift of new life he has received can be expressed in all its fullness and beauty. This, Jesus says clearly, is the work of the community. I don't believe it's a coincidence that these events, these two miracles, occur immediately before what follows them in the story, as given us by John. You see, immediately after these events, the news of the raising and freeing of Lazarus reaches the religious leaders who have opposed Jesus. It is upon receiving this news, and not before, that they commit themselves to a dedicated effort to have Jesus arrested, tortured, and assassinated. This moment in the story, after the re-enlivening and the unbinding, is an inflection point in the whole story of the gospel, according to John, where the corrupt religious leadership unites to end the threat they can now recognize. So, what is so threatening about what has happened in this brief encounter? And why does it lead so directly to the decision of Jesus' enemies to seek a way to end his life? Clearly, the evidence of new life returning to one who was lost was a powerful event. But Jesus' instructions to unbind him and let him go seem to demonstrate an understanding on Jesus' part that the experience of new life alone was insufficient to bring about the fullness of life into which Lazarus was invited by Christ. The renewal of life, the overpowering experience of enlivening was and is the work of God. And yet, with the mutual encouragement, accompaniment, and reciprocal nature of the community of faith, so much more becomes possible. I have come to believe that this aspect of unbinding one another is at the heart of why our Friends meetings exist. Through our worship together, we are nourished, strengthened, and challenged, often over the long arc of time. We are offered countless opportunities to try again to unbind one another from whatever may restrain the divine life from becoming more and more expressed in our living. The first miracle is the immediate work of the Spirit. We are given to each other so that the second miracle may unfold. As we continue tonight, however we otherwise might relate to this text, I want to invite us to hold this story of Lazarus as a way of seeing our life together in our meetings. Always, there is the direct inbreaking of the Spirit, bringing new life, calling us out of death. And always, there is the challenge and the charge to the community to draw near to one another, to grasp the entangling grave clothes, to help one another to find another breath of freedom, to live in the life and power. So I want to ask this question again. Why were these events perceived as such a threat? As with the raising and unbinding of Lazarus, the fullness of life and unspeakable joy in the power and presence of the living God, which is stirred in us through these encounters, shape the foundations of the death-dealing powers that occupy and corrupt this world and herald the birth of a new creation. It is this way of living together and the deep joy in which it is rooted that was experienced as a mortal threat to the corrupt leaders of Jesus' day. It is equally threatening to those same forces in our own time. The more free we help each other to become in the life of the Spirit, and the more our liberated lives bear witness to the reality of God's love, always seeking new strongholds in the world, the more the powers of deceit, confusion, and violence lose their grasp. Okay, so there's something deeply important about this unbinding, something that happens in the context of the community. But how, more particularly, does this happen in the Life of Friends meetings? And why do our local meetings matter? In the course of my life, I've been blessed by many experiences of what I might call mountaintop moments, whether as part of spiritual retreats or youth groups, global conferences, or in wider relationships beyond my local meeting. I am profoundly grateful for these opportunities for growth and connection, for the forging of lasting spiritual friendships, for learning and inspiration that these opportunities afforded me. And so, for a long time, I believed that it was from these kinds of exciting gatherings and events that renewal would come. Local meetings, by contrast, can seem so slow, so quiet, so mundane. Sometimes in worship, it can feel as if nothing is happening at all. But through re-olded eyes, I have come to see that it is in these little cells where the divine life is most patiently, persistently, and powerfully at work, shepherding hearts and souls in relationship, daily forming the future of friends. Through re-olded eyes, it becomes absolutely clear that our local meetings are the crucible, the inflection point of the Quaker movement, and that it is there, here, that we who seek to tend the unfolding of this adventure of becoming friends must focus our sustained efforts and attention. With this in mind, I hope to share something from my field notes that might offer a glimpse into how this unbinding happens, seen with re-olded eyes. Reflecting on travel and the ministry across North America and beyond over more than 2 decades, and in the particularity of seeking to serve and nurture those who serve in the more than 60 monthly meetings and dozens of smaller groups that make up New England Yearly Meeting of Friends. I see aspects of what I have come to understand as 5 rhythms of common life that are integral to the thriving of Friends meetings. These rhythms of worship, exploration, service, guidance, and testimony are threads through which the Spirit weaves the fabric of our faith, sculpts the pattern of our hearts, and teaches us to live in the fullness of life for which we were born. As we move in these rhythms of common life, we are journeying together on a shared pilgrimage in the light. The first and formative rhythm at the center of our lives, are you with me? The first and formative rhythm at the center of our lives as meetings is a rhythm of worship. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, we share in a process of listening and yielding to the Spirit moving among us, and learn to receive and respond to the messages, both silent and spoken, that may arise in this time together. In this process, we are drawn together into what our tradition calls covenant community. And I want to emphasize this particularly so that we're all on the same page, because it's important to what follows. As each of us learns in the unfolding of time to open our hearts to the presence in our midst, we grow in tenderness to the sensitivity to the promptings of love and truth as they make a home in us. As this happens, we also grow in relationship and tenderness with those who share and have shared these benches with us. In this way, we become a covenant community. Traveling minister Emily Province describes covenant community as we give ourselves to God and God gives us to a group of people. I think it can happen the other way too. We find ourselves drawn together with others on a similar search, and then together we grow in our life in the Spirit. But the essential thing is that covenant community is more than a simple interaction or relationship among humans, but a relationship that includes a body of human beings on a pilgrimage, on a journey, brought together in the Spirit. Through re-olded eyes, if we persist in it, coming to meet worship becomes not an activity we fit into our already overburdened schedules when we can, but the anchor of our lives. A place of refreshment, of refuge, of testing, a pool of living water into which we can dive deeply, from which we can drink deeply and feel our thirsting spirits restored. And so the rhythm of worship is inextricably bound up with the formation, if we allow it, of a covenant community among us. That is, a sacred bond that is both divine and human. An anchor point where we can come to discover our primary identity and belonging as children of God, that is both always being offered and which must be accepted by each of us who choose to walk this path with one another in the Spirit. With this choice comes a commitment to be prepared to offer and receive both encouragement and challenge, both celebration and consolation, to meet each other where we are and to invite one another when the time is right to more. We are called into an ever-deepening relationship with the love at the center of existence, an intimacy with the divine reality that sustains our lives. This discovery can be felt in a moment. Coming to know it more fully is the fruit of time. Whatever additional beautiful ways we express our faith as worshiping communities, through dance, through song, through prepared messages or prayers, this common life of a covenant community is, in a vital way, nurtured, grown, and tested through a regular rhythm of expectant waiting worship. The second rhythm that sustains the life of a meeting is a rhythm of exploration, where this covenanted community seeks regular opportunities to explore friends' living tradition together, including both the writings and experience of friends past and present, as well as the deeper roots of our life in the Christian and Hebrew scriptures. In this rhythm, we seek to reflect on and invite the guidance of our spiritual ancestors into our lives today. Here, through re-olded eyes, we might ask, how deep are my roots? How much have I explored, and how might I explore the tradition of which we are the spiritual inheritors? What might I learn from the experience, writing, testimony, and traditions from which our life as contemporary friends arises? How might we grow in our shared spiritual understanding if we opened ourselves together to the wisdom offered through these sources? In some of our meetings, this rhythm of exploration happens formally, through some kind of dedicated class or program. But in the essence of this rhythm is the recognition that we are not the first to have sought to open our hearts to the living Spirit. We are not the first to have wrestled with the tension between God's invitation and the invitation of a culture of distraction and confusion. We are not the first to have sought the deeper wells of wisdom, the greater meaning of our lives, the place where grief and gratitude can take counsel. We are not the first to have despaired at the failures of leadership and the capacity for human evil. Exploring our living tradition can happen in a spiritual friendship between two people who meet over tea or take a walk together, or through a regular practice of retreat, carried out over years among a small and maybe sometimes changing collection of friends within the meeting. It can happen through a summer book group, where those interested in exploring a particular topic make a short commitment to gather, reflect, and learn together. It can happen through sharing our spiritual journeys, through open and reflective Bible study informed by the insights of early friends and of fellow travelers, whose provocative perspectives might help us to deepen our sense of the profound and vast waters of tradition and interpretation in which we swim. It can happen through personal reading of the journals of friends from generations before, and how that exploration might find form in vocal ministry, in meeting for worship, or in a moment of humble counsel over coffee at the rise of meeting. How we engage with tradition matters. The theological historian and teacher Yaroslav Pelikan, is that a great name? Whose work I first discovered just through such a rhythm of exploration with my good friend Wes Daniels, makes a helpful and, for me, memorable distinction, a powerful contrast between traditionalism and tradition. Traditionalism, Pelikan suggests, is the dead faith of the living. Tradition, in contrast, is the living faith of the dead. It is this understanding of tradition as the living faith of those who have come before us, present and dynamic and accessible in our own times, that I believe is essential to our common life as friends, and why this rhythm of exploration is so important. Like any living tradition, ours is multivocal. We will assuredly find within our shared tradition aspects which give words to our deepest experiences and responses to our persistent questions, just as we will no doubt encounter voices, perspectives, practices, and understandings that are obstacles to us, which we cannot hear or see as true, which we may need, even if only for this time, to strenuously reject. That is the nature of life in a covenant community, which practices a rhythm of exploration of this kind. Like anything worthwhile, it can be challenging, but it is also vital. I can't ignore that tonight, those of us gathered here in Richmond are gathered just steps from the former study of D. Elton Trueblood, a founder of Merrill School of Religion and one of the friends whose service most shaped the religious society of France in the 20th century and beyond. A consistent focus of his teaching that has spoken to my condition was the sense that if we as friends come to view the traditions in which we are rooted as simply roots from which we have grown, rather than roots that sustain us, from which we draw present nourishment, we would quickly, in a generation or two, become like cut flowers. Beautiful for a moment, but in some ultimate sense, already dead. We who have ears to hear, let us hear. However this rhythm happens, the ongoing nurture of covenant relationship between each participant in a meeting, through the exploration of our living tradition, nurtures the meeting as a whole. Three, a third rhythm which we can discover as essential in the life of a healthy meeting is a rhythm of service, where we take responsibility both for calling forth the diverse spiritual gifts and capacities of those who are covenanted with us, and for faithfully stewarding and sharing the gifts, resources, and capacities we carry for the building up of the whole community. Foundational to earlier generations of friends' understandings and of many today is the trust drawing from the writing and experience of the early church, that spiritual gifts are given by God through each member of the whole body of the meeting for the building up of the covenant community, and to help us to be channels of love, mercy, and justice in this world we share. Central to the re-olding of service is the affirmation that it is our responsibility as part of a covenant community, not simply to keep watch for the gifts, whether nascent or more fully flowering, in everyone, but to joyfully call them out, perhaps Lazarus style, and then to do all we can to remove barriers so that they might be given their fullest expression. This nurture and encouragement of the exercise of gifts is not about elevating anyone over anyone else, or about someone gaining a special status or privilege. It is about trusting from a foundation of gratitude that God's abundance is poured out among us, and that every gift, every capacity, every resource of our lives can be turned into a channel of universal love, if we choose it, with the help of the covenant community. No act of service is insignificant. The forms they take are myriad, but at their heart, they all spring from the same source and the same intention: to help make visible, in practical, embodied terms, a community that is a sign, a foretaste, an outpost, maybe even a rampart of the reign of heaven, here, now, and yet still coming into the world in fullness, both to those in the meeting and any whose lives might be touched through relationship. It can happen at a bedside in the critical care unit, or in the work of keeping the meeting house warm, or giving a ride to a traveling minister, or helping another friend find release from financial entanglements, by helping to make a plan to pay off their debt, or by paying off their debt. It can happen when we pray for an angry, wayward, and suffering teenager, or hold the meeting for worship in the light of God's love, or clerk the meeting's discernment. It can happen when we sit together in the presence of a profound, inexplicable loss beyond words. It can happen in doing the dishes after a potluck, or delivering food so someone won't have to miss a meal tonight. It can happen as friends not as vulnerable as some of us, accompany an immigrant neighbor, or as friends among us from recent immigrant backgrounds, as well as those who will go in here, nurture the web of resilience within and beyond our Quaker communities, bringing us all to live more fully as one people of the Spirit, regardless of nationality or status. These acts of service reveal our hearts and knit us together. They are practical, tangible, touchable signs of the work of the Spirit through and among us. The life of the covenant community is sustained and renewed by this rhythm of service. Through this fourth rhythm, a rhythm of guidance, we seek to return to the intimate and liberating instruction and counsel of the Spirit. The will of God, however imperfectly we may be able to name it for ourselves and for our covenant communities. A way that in some sense wants to be known by us. Both through personal discernment as well as through communal practice, it is essential to the life of a friend's meeting to cultivate openness, receptivity, and responsiveness to God's guidance, and to clear away whatever distractions or obstacles may stand in the way. I take it as a basic understanding of the religious society of friends that each of us can be intimately led and guided by the Spirit, the same Spirit that was before the world was. And that, however imperfectly, we have come to discover that we can communally experience this guidance for our life together as a covenant community. In acknowledging this to be true, it can be tempting to place the emphasis almost exclusively on the message we might receive, the decision we might make, or the outcome we think it points to. Essential to our practice of discernment, however, is the cultivation of a listening heart and the loosening of the binds that might prevent us from hearing clearly, both individually and as a covenant community. Through the rhythm of guidance, we come to know the will and way of God that becomes imprinted on our hearts. As we listen and live this way, we can unbind each other's attention from the distractions of this world and help each other more and more to orient our hearts to the work of the Spirit around and among us. So foundational to this understanding is a rootedness in gratitude for the breath in our lungs, for the rising of the sun on a new day, and the first flowers of spring, for the opportunity to gather in fellowship as friends, for the quiet joy that meets us as we discover the place of unity with God and witness the fruits of the Spirit being born among us. Discernment, then, is not simply a decision-making process, but rather a process of having our hearts prepared to be recipients and bearers of the love and compassion that come through studying with a teacher whose heart seeks to be made known among us. If we allow it, this rhythm of guidance reshapes our hearts. On this long and winding path, we might someday, often with surprise and wonder, come to discover that we suddenly experience the world in a new way, perhaps with a fuller measure of acceptance, humility, patience, or loving humor. Long-held hurts might gently fall away. We are coming to see ourselves and others with the gaze of a shepherd whose gentle direction we are learning to heed. This can happen slowly, as little by little we find ourselves more free from the resentment and anger that may be plaguing us. It can happen in a moment, when in the midst of rising rage or condemnation, we are swept with compassion or forgiveness, overcome with a humble empathy that displaces prideful insistence. Through re-olded eyes, we come to understand discernment as an unfolding in which the reign of heaven comes more alive in us, offering the opportunity to turn toward every decision, every crisis, every aspect of our living with greater attention to the voice we have come to know. And from this place, the next step becomes clear. When we consider the rhythm of guidance, we might also speak about a leading or a call to take up a particular piece of work. While this sometimes may involve a concrete project or action we are to take, responding to a leading in a fuller sense can be understood as less about a fixed outcome and more about learning to be led. It is the work of a lifetime to humbly seek to distinguish that voice from the many others that demand our attention. Generations of friends have placed great emphasis on the importance of being watchful about where we place our attention, even and especially in the small things. Because it is where we place our attention that will shape how we live. As Jesus reminded his disciples, it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. The more we find time and ways to listen for the voice of the Spirit in our lives, the more finely tuned the ear of our heart becomes, so that we may hear more easily and respond more readily and reflexively when we are called. An orientation of Re-Olding reminds us that this has been a key concern of friends since our early days. James Mailer warns, "For you will find many plants besides the tree of life, all which seek to be fed and strengthened in the mind and in the affections." In the contexts of our distracted times, we who have ears to hear, let us hear. Another way of saying this might also be that the more we fill our lives with other voices, the more we give our time and attention to the things that distract us or that call us toward grievance rather than gratitude, toward an orientation that places our self-centered desires above the needs of others, the further we are drawn away from the capacity to hear the voice of truth calling us home. This is why a communal practice of guidance is essential in the life of our meetings. One more, friends. The fifth rhythm of common life that is vital for a meeting to thrive is a rhythm of testimony, where we support one another again and again as we each and all seek to carry the treasure and the implications of our faith into the whole of our lives, partnering with the Spirit in the redeeming of creation, bearing the witness of joy and new life as the community of Lazarus did in the face of an often discordant and deadening culture. And here is where I want to especially emphasize a particular gift that an attention to Re-Olding might offer us. I believe that more than ever, we need to examine what we mean by testimony and how our understanding of this term shapes our living. I want to invite you to shift in your chairs for a moment, and then to close your eyes as we settle into a very brief period of stillness. Those in the room and those online, if possible for you. And I invite you to turn your attention to a person who has been a mentor, a guide, an example to you in your walk of faith. Whose example, explicit or otherwise, offered you a pattern in some sense for how you hope to live today. Whose character, being, and presence illustrate for you what it means to lead a faithful life as part of a covenant community on pilgrimage in the Friends tradition. Someone once asked me who I would say my mentor was. I will always remember the startled silence I fell into, finding myself at a loss for words. Why was this such a difficult question to answer? Did I believe from some deep wound of loneliness that I had no one in my life I could claim in that way. And then, with a rush of tears, I realized the question was difficult to answer, not because I had not been blessed by a mentor, but because I had been blessed with so many. These include, not least, a substantial number of you who are in this room, or listening online from your own home places. And I feel the presence of many others no longer with us in body, hovering around us as we open our hearts to remember. So great a cloud of witnesses. This, friends, is what we might glimpse through re-olding our understanding of testimony. I remember how powerful it was for me, and yet how ringingly natural, when I first learned that the term memorial, that kind of spiritual obituary that many meetings write to remember and celebrate the life of a friend after their passing, was relatively new in some friends' communities. The older term for this practice, and the text that results, still in use among some of us, is a testimony to the grace of God as witnessed in the life of this friend. And here, to me, is the place where the meaning of testimony turns. Re-olding our understanding of testimony invites us to consider every aspect of our lives as bearing witness, as giving evidence, not to an abstract set of principles, but to the reality of the love of God at work in the world through the vehicle of our changed and changing lives. I want to invite you to think back to the faces of those friends you brought to mind just a few moments ago. Can you see, amidst whatever other qualities come to mind, the presence of their joy? I've felt led several times over the years to open my eyes during meeting for worship in my home meeting, and with a tender gaze to look around the room at those gathered. Through the years, through life together as covenant community, I have been given glimpses into the wounds, the pain, the grief, the triumphs, the struggles, the catastrophic heartbreak, the redemption, and the profound resilience that abides in the hearts of these particular friends with whom I share in worship, and who have walked with me in the wildernesses of my life. Sharing life together on this path of faith has changed us, and our lives bear witness to this humble and grace-filled truth, even when all we have to give is a cold and a broken hallelujah. By my works, the Apostle James writes, I will show you my faith. By our living, friends, we make visible what is truly at the center of our lives. There is no perfection here. The story isn't finished. There's plenty of messiness and ugliness and woundedness and stumbling. But through all this, the testimony that is the life of our meetings can and does bear witness that the steps of our feet are turning toward a way of being and becoming more alive in wonder, more free to love, more resilient, more forgiving, more grounded in joy. This testimony isn't just for us. It is a testimony to the whole world, to all of our siblings of all faiths and none, all with whom we share this wonder-filled, suffering, resplendent creation. Perhaps as we seek to be in relationship with our neighbors, welcoming their gifts as well, the wider communities in which our meetings are rooted might grow in love, in tolerance, in resilience, in common care. And perhaps, for some we meet, the witness of our common life just might be received as a welcome and open invitation to join us on the journey. In the rhythm of testimony, we learn to support one another as we seek to carry the promptings, implications, and fruits of our faith into the whole of our lives. This is not limited to public activism, or to political advocacy, or to public preaching, or to grand acts of courage. Testimony is the way that our repatterned hearts make palpably present the character of the friend we are coming to know. It is the daily willingness to be instruments of a humble, world-changing power, sowing perennial seeds of a deeper and more resilient hope, an enduring and steadfast joy wherever we may come. This is the rhythm of testimony. So, 5 rhythms of common life, always in process in the covenant communities of a Friends meeting on pilgrimage, revealed with re-olded eyes. 5 ways that the bound-up Lazarus among us, both thee and me, can be set free to more fully express the pattern of divine love in our world. I have borne witness to the unbinding of Lazarus many times over the years, through an unfolding journey of ministry under the care of my home meeting in Merrill. For 2 decades, my service in ministry has been under the care of our local meeting, held in various forms by a group of friends appointed by the meeting to exercise oversight and to assist in the stewardship of the responsibility the meeting has recognized in me. I say responsibility because that is my understanding of what it is meant to be recognized as carrying a particular gifted ministry in speech, writing, and presence. A charge from the community that has seen the life of the Spirit arising in me, calling me out of the cave of brokenness again and again, and who, in the unbinding of my heart and the unraveling of my grave clothes, has helped me to be a sometimes encourager for others. I can testify tonight to 2 miracles then. To the infinite grace and presence and re-enlivening power of God. And to the sacred participation of a particular collection of people, woven together in spirit and shared living, in whose hands my grave clothes became part of a tapestry of resilience and joy. And so we come to joy. We can hear its echoes in the book of Job, when the voice of the Eternal speaks from out of the whirlwind to describe the first moments of creation, when the morning stars all sang together, and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy. We can perhaps recognize that joy as the same that came to certain shepherds in the frozen night of 1st century Palestine under foreign occupation and local corrupt misrule. It is the same joy that was born of the community in the unbinding of Lazarus, and the joy in those in later years who gave us this story, which so threatened the foundations of empty religion and empire that what followed from it bent the arc of history. It is the same joy that embraces us in the testimony of James Naylor, tried for horrid blasphemy, tortured, branded, beaten and robbed by brigands, left for dead, yet still proclaiming with humble beauty the character of the Spirit in whose power he was set free. It is the same joy on the lips of Mary Dyer as she was led to the gallows on Boston Common for her preaching freedom in the life and power, proclaiming in that darkest hour the deepest joy she had ever felt, that no eye could see, no ear could hear, no tongue could speak, no heart could understand. It is the joy that made its unassailable home in the heart of the Dutch Jewish mystic Eddie Hillesum, as she chose, though she could have avoided it, to accompany her neighbors and her family to the Auschwitz death camp, to bear the witness of what she knew as the thinking heart of God among them, knowing that love is stronger than death. It is the same joy described by Elise Boulding, the 20th century Friends minister and peace advocate, who in 1956 offered this
witness. For the real difference between happiness and joy is that one is grounded in this world, the other in eternity. Happiness cannot encompass suffering and evil. Joy can. Happiness depends on the present. Joy leaps into the future and triumphantly creates a new present out of it. It is the fruit of the Spirit, a gift of God. No one can own it. Joy is the ultimate liberation of the human spirit. It enables us to travel to the very gates of heaven and to the depths of hell and never cease rejoicing. It is this same joy and the unshakable power of it which we can discover together in the common life of our meetings, that mourns with God's beloveds held even now in the misery of detention camps, with the sick, the suffering, and the lonely, which cradles children made orphans by the blasphemy of war waged in the name of the Prince of Peace. It is the joy that rekindles the fires of hope and animates the heart yearning, willing, and laboring for justice and wholeness in these times. It is the joy that is set before us also, now and forevermore. It is the joy that overcomes the world. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, that so easily distracts, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, the founder and perfecter, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and now abides at the inflection point where everything comes together, the place of the homecoming, in the power and presence of God. Thank you, friends. Just a quick word before we say goodbye to folks online. As you can tell, it might not be a surprise that someone once jokingly suggested to me that if they were to assign me a life verse from Scripture, it would be the one from near the end of the Gospel of John, where Jesus says to his disciples, "I have so much more to say to you." and I do. I had hoped in our time together to explore with you the potential implications of this practice of seeing with re-olded eyes in other dimensions of our common life as friends. I'd have loved to explore further how, with re-olded eyes, we might approach the challenges of nurturing servant leadership in our meetings, or examine our relationship with spiritual authority, or our relationship with the seasonality and the long view of time, perhaps through exploring our participation in our quarterly and yearly meetings. Or how a re-olding of our perspective might help us reveal and perhaps turn toward an emphasis on function over form in friends' organizations. Or how a perception of re-olding might help us more fully restore a responsibility and rootedness in place. A more whole relationship between humanity and all with whom we share this miraculous, generous, suffering creation. I was excited to share with you about the spring migration of salamanders in the vernal pools in the hills where I live, and about the autumnal pilgrimage of thousands of raptors through the forested river valleys and ridges of my home. There were metaphors there. About seasoning firewood, about making honey, about the parable of the swallows and what it might have to teach us about our spiritual journey together. But I won't. Not tonight. Because we are finite creatures in finite time, and more would be distracting. So perhaps even better, I must leave that to an unfolding conversation to which I hope this evening might be just an early invitation. So if you are willing, I'd like to send you out with some homework, both friends online and friends in the room. The full and imperfect text of this address, as well as a recording, I'm told, will be available to each of you who registered to attend, or to anyone who emails the Quaker Leadership Center to ask for a copy. My invitation to you is that you and we become and receive through the Spirit that so much more to say that I was yearning for. This evening, or in the coming weeks and months, I invite you to find someone, hopefully with their permission, with whom to share your reflections, questions, or wonderings about anything you heard or felt today. Ideally with someone who is a part of your local community of faith. Once you've shared it, if they are willing, ask them to share with you too. And see where the conversation might go from there. Thank you, friends. I think Della has the closing words for us.
Thank you, Noah. It's been such a pleasure to be allowed the privilege for the Quaker Leadership Center, which is a ministry of the Earlham School of Religion, to host the Perkins Family Lectures. So thank you, Jim and family, for making this possible. And we want to let you know that the Quaker Leadership Center, part of what's really lovely about what Noah has just shared is that the reason the Quaker Leadership Center even exists is because we are here to help leaders. And by leaders, we mean anybody who takes responsibility in a local meeting for the life of that meeting. We're here to help all of us leaders, faithfully adapt to the way things are now and to continue to do that. So we are, again, grateful for these wonderful words, and we have, thanks to the wonders of technology, everybody who signed up, everybody who registered, has that last bit that Noah just spoke already in your email box, so don't forget about it. So we will bid adieu to the folks online, and those of us that are still gathered here will be invited into conversation